Make sure you guys hit the subscribe button if you guys are enjoying the content that we're throwing up. And make sure you guys hit the like button if you enjoy the video. And yeah, let's begin. All right, what's going on, guys? This is Rob, and we are picking back up again with Spider-Man. I almost said Spider-Man 2. With Spider-Man. We're picking back up with Miles Morales and Peter Parker. Now, this is kind of a three-pronged event, right? Like the first time, in the first issue they met, and the second issue they fought, and this one they team up. So it's kind of a cool bit of storytelling here, right? But in the instance where they had initially fought each other and things had kind of popped off, and they were sort of coming to terms, and you know, with regards to this reality, they're suddenly met by this avatar of Mysterio. Now, again, this is kind of the robot slash, well, really just straight robot that Mysterio is using. He is in the main Marvel universe, but he's piloting this and it's moving around in the Ultimate Universe, right? And so because of that, as soon as it takes down the helicopter that Peter Parker and Miles Morales were in, the two of them start to team up to fight up Mysterio. The problem with this is that Miles Morales has never really fought anybody like Mysterio before. And even Mysterio, as he exists in the main Marvel universe, doesn't really exist the same way in the Ultimate Universe. To kind of give you guys some perspective of the big differences between these two things, because I believe by this point Doctor Strange is dead, there came a point in the Ultimate Universe where Doctor Strange fought Dormammu. And in the main Marvel Universe, Doctor Strange has fought Dormammu a multitude of times and won pretty much every single time. In the Ultimate Universe, he fights him once and dies. It's nuts. Like he's painfully outclassed in comparison to the power that Dormammu has. Like he kills him with a quickness, and that's basically it, right? That it happens so incredibly fast. Because you're talking about Mysterio, who still maintained his ability to create illusions despite using a kind of avatar form, you end up having Peter Parker, who picks up on what's going on. Now, it took him a moment to realize it because he's like, something weird is going on, right? It's a more powerful strain of the illusion that he normally uses, but what he ends up doing is conjuring all of Spider-Man's villains and the things that Miles Morales fears the most, right? So basically, their greatest fears between the two of them. And with this happening, you really only ever see the Scorpion from the Ultimate Universe. You see Uncle Aaron, the Prowler from the Ultimate Universe, and Omega Red from the Ultimate Universe, but you only really see those because those are only really the villains that Miles Morales has fought so far. For Peter Parker, it's a whole host of stuff, right? It's a whole host of things, Green Goblin and Dr. Octopus and all that stuff. But that's what makes this so bonkers, is because of the fact that Miles doesn't really know how to navigate this. Now, this kind of illusion that Mysterio creates, that's one of the big things to understand. His illusions can be tangible. If they're powerful enough, they can be tangible. And that's one of the big differences, is that in the early days, if I remember correctly, in the early days, his illusions were more or less intangible, right? So he could trick you into believing you were somewhere, but he couldn't really make things interact with you. In this instance, he can, and it's really kind of been that way for a number of years in Marvel Comics. But Mysterio uses his powers to quite literally have these guys attack Miles Morales and Spider-Man and Peter Parker, right? So it's like Venom and it's Carnage, it's all these guys. And this is incredibly dangerous because these are forces that Miles isn't used to facing off against. But this is one of the big differences here, is that Miles hasn't really faced off against Mysterio before, but at the same time, this kind of magic doesn't necessarily exist inside the Ultimate Universe. Now, this may seem like it would naturally work against Miles Morales. He's basically being exposed to something that he hasn't really seen before and wouldn't really know how to navigate those waters. But instead of doing what Peter Parker seems to be doing here, which is kind of overthinking it to a degree, instead, Miles actually manages to get the upper hand and basically incapacitate Mysterio temporarily, if for no other reason than to basically take down his avatar form and then essentially destroy it, right? Like destroy that body, because Miles picks up on the fact this is the reason why it's happening. Now, again, this is one of those instances in the Ultimate Spider-Man comics where people were a little finicky. They were like, I have a hard time believing that Miles would be able to pick up on this and Peter Parker couldn't. You're talking about two characters from two different realities who navigate waters differently. When this story first came out, there was one group of people who looked at this and said, okay, the only reason Miles is able to figure this out on his own is because Bendis is writing it, and Bendis is pushing Miles and really wants him to be like the new Ultimate Universe Spider-Man. And of what use would his character be if he didn't have some kind of caveat over Peter Parker from, Peter Parker in general, right? Even from the main Marvel universe. It's one of these interesting concepts, one of these interesting quagmires. But again, with regards to Mysterio, he's one of these villains where by all standards of measurement, he would have gotten the upper hand on Miles Morales, because what makes Mysterio's, his powers so incredibly potent is he's much like Mastermind or somebody like Charles Xavier. Not in so much as the powers he possesses, he's just an illusionist, right? He doesn't really have telepathy or anything like that. But much like those guys, his powers can totally envelope you and convince you that you're somewhere that you're not, right? Mysterio gets his hands on you, he can convince you that that you're a world away, you know, and you're in, you know, some pirate land and you're fighting against pirates or something like that, you know, whether or not you're able to actually pick up on that are two distinctly different things, right? Creating that illusion, if you're of sound mind, you'll immediately know that something's off, right? Regardless, when everything kind of pops off, Peter Parker actually ends up taking off. He doesn't leave the universe, he just goes to explore it. And what you end up having are the Ultimates who arrive here on the scene with Miles Morales. Now, one of the big things that goes on here is, again, because these characters were designed to be a lot more toned down than the versions that we saw in the Ultimate Universe, that Tony Stark doesn't really know how to navigate this technology, right? Like in the main Marvel Universe, he would have picked it up right off the bat and just been like, okay, so here's what's going on with this. Instead, in the Ultimate Universe, his intelligence is a little more grounded, right? So it's not as though he's just wildly out there as intelligent as the story needs him to be. Instead, it's a little more grounded here. So he recognized it insofar as it's an exceedingly, you know, advanced form of technology, and that it's an avatar that's basically being used by, you know, this Mysterio guy to control this avatar version from someplace else. But in terms of being able to reverse engineer it almost instantaneously, that doesn't happen here, right? That doesn't really take place here. Now, for Miles' part, of course, he ends up asking Nick Fury, where'd the other Spider-Man go? And Fury's response is, he went out there to explore things. And that's the nature of this, right? When you're someone like Spider-Man and you face off against Mysterio and you've gone through his illusions so many times, the biggest struggle he has here is trying to figure out whether any of this is real or false. That's the biggest struggle he has at the moment, because, you know, you got to kind of think of this from Peter's perspective. He was in his own universe, he was facing off against Mysterio, found himself yanked through a portal, ended up in this new reality where he's dead, there's a new Spider-Man that took his place, and that there's a Nick Fury there, you know, who seemingly allowed the two of them to team up, and then Mysterio's avatar appears, he ends up facing off against all of his villains, even though they're illusions, and then of course Miles Morales ends up destroying that avatar, and now Peter's basically exploring. In his mind, all of this could be the illusion, and that's the truth of the thing, right? That's the truth of the thing here. When you're facing off against Mysterio, this could all be illusion. It's entirely possible that Bendis could have ended this story and it was all just one great huge illusion created by Mysterio, and it would work. It would be believable because he's done it before, right? That's the advancement of Mysterio's illusions, is that it screws with your head so incredibly badly. But as we know, Peter Parker is actually in the Ultimate Universe. And so he basically starts tracking different things down, right? He goes to the place that would have been his apartment. He ends up finding a corner store. He asks her, like, how long has this been here? She's like, I don't know. How long have you worked here? I've worked here 2 years, you know? And he's like, okay, so there was never an apartment building here. You know, there was never an apartment here. And so basically he never stayed here. The other thing that ends up happening after he, you know, beats up some guy who runs into the place and robs it, is he asks her for, you know, for a tablet that can help him access the internet. And when he does, he finds an article that the Spider-Man in this universe really did die here. And that everybody really knew that he was Peter Parker, that he was a high school student from Queens. And so it's one of these things where it's kind of like, I really am in a universe where I'm dead. The other part of that is, of course, she has this little necklace around her neck. And of course, it's her way of paying respects to Peter Parker as Spider-Man. And then he's like, you need to tell me exactly what happened to Peter Parker in this universe. And so what we end up doing is we basically end up picking up, you know, some period of time later with Aunt May and with Gwen Stacy from the Ultimate Universe, and Peter Parker shows up on their doorstep, right? Like literally just shows up there. And this is one of the most amazing things here. This is one of the most amazing moments, because this is Peter Parker coming to grips with Gwen Stacy, who is still alive in this universe, and Aunt May, and having to face the fact that in their mind, he's dead. And so it's kind of like, wow, like this is one of those things. It's a hyper emotional story if you're a Peter Parker fan, right? It's kind of nuts. It's Peter Parker re-encountering Aunt May and Gwen Stacy. It's kind of nuts. But with that being said, guys, we're gonna bring this video to an end. If you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and I will catch you all later. Peace.